Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max. සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න. Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max. සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න.
Navadav Healthy Ritual. 4 එකක් moisturizing milk, cornflour සහ coconut oil සමගින්.
හරිම සුදුයි.
On First at 9 tonight, this Wednesday the 7th of December 2022. Not so light. Latest audit report reveals that the Sri Lankan government made a loss of nearly 6 billion rupees due to the termination of the light rail transit project. Power saga. Duration of increased power cuts will be decided if PUCSL refuses to increase electricity tariffs again, says CB. But PUCSL is yet to receive a tariff proposal.
Do not worry about this automatic tariff hike that they have proposed of the first day of January and first day of July. It will never happen.
Sustainability. Delegation of German Industry and Commerce calls on SMEs and corporates in Sri Lanka to embark on due diligence and good governance.
The future of businesses will either be sustainable or there will not be businesses. They will not have a future.
Not anymore. Sri Lanka scraps COVID vaccination negative test requirement on overseas arrivals with effect from today.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Andrew Bernard. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. Now in the top story for tonight, the special audit report on the unilateral termination of the light rail transit system project from Colombo to Malabe has identified that the government incurred a loss of 5,977 million rupees. Now this was as a result of the project not being re-implemented and the contractual company taking action to recover expenditure incurred on consultancy services up to the point of termination. In 2016, the cabinet decided to introduce a light rail transit system to address the transport issue in the Colombo megapolis region. Economic, financial and environmental assessments had been performed on this project and it had been observed according to all criteria that benefits could see reaped from the investments of the project and raise the welfare of the public depending on economic assessments performed. This project had been assigned in 2016 to the Japan International Cooperation Agency for implementation and to the Oriental Consultants Global Company Limited for conducting a feasibility study. The main consultation activities of this project proposed to be implemented on a concessionary loan with a grace period of 12 years and a repayment period of 40 years were being carried out by Oriental Consultants Global Company Limited on effective identification. Approval had been granted by the directive of the then President and Cabinet decision dated on the 28th of September 2020 for unilateral termination of the activities of the project with immediate effect by the government of Sri Lanka by identifying this project as a costly and not cost-effective project. Accordingly, due to unilateral termination of this project by the Sri Lankan government, a sum of 5,977 million rupees was considered as an uneconomic expenditure incurred relating to the project up to the date of termination. This was because the project will not be re-implemented and the contractual consultant company is taking action to recover expenditure incurred on termination of the project and a loss of profit to the consultant company due to termination of the project by the government of Sri Lanka. Furthermore, as a result, expenditure and a loss of profit that may have to be paid to the 106 consultant company, as well as a loss of economic and social benefits, which could be reaped after implementation of the said project by the government, would prove to be a long-term disadvantage to the country. Moreover, termination of the project without taking action to re-implement it by finding an alternative financial source is a contentious matter. As such, the Auditor General stated that the report was prepared on the powers vested by the Constitution and the National Audit Act No. 19 of 2018 with the intention of identifying the impact on the country resulting from such activities. Now, the Ceylon Electricity Board says that the government will have to decide the duration of increased power cuts if the Public Utilities Commission refuses to increase electricity tariffs again. Convening a media briefing, the CB said they have not requested to revise tariffs to cover their losses, instead to cover their ongoing operational costs.
විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලයේ මුළු වියදමෙන් 85ක් තියෙන ජනන වියදම. ලබන වසරේ එක යුනිට් එකක වියදම රුපියල් 52.36ක් ඇවරේජ් එක. මේ ඇවරේජ් රේන්ෆෝල් එකක් එනවායි කියන්නේ. ඩ්‍රයි රේන්ෆෝල් එකක් ආවොත් මේක 56ට යනවා. අපි විදුලි බිල වැඩි කරා අගෝස්තු මාසේ. ඒ අගෝස්තු මාසේ වැඩි කරාට පස්සේ අපිට යුනිට් එකකට එන ආදායම ඇවරේජ් එක 29.14යි. එතකොට එක යුනිට් එකකට 22.57ක පරතරයක්. ඒ පරතරය තමයි ඇත්තටම විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලයට ලොකු බරක් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ.
ඒක එතුමන්ලගේ මතය ගැන මට ප්‍රකාශ කරන්න බෑ.
අයි අවුරුදු 9ක් තිස්සේ ඔබතුමන්ලා විදුලි බිල වැඩි කරන්න ඉල්ලීමක් කරේ.
අපි කරලා තියෙන්නේ.
කොහෙද කරේ?
කරලා තියෙන්නේ මහජන උපදෙස් කොමිසමට.
ලිපි කීයක් දුන්නද?
එහෙම ඉතින් මේකට අරගෙන ඉල්ලන්නේ ලිපි කීයක කියලා ඔබතුමා අප වෙලාවක පෙන්වන්න පුළුවන් ඔය කියන ඇක්ට් එක අනුව කොච්චර ප්‍රමාණයක් කරලා තියෙනවද?
ඒ කැබිනට් පේපර් එකේ තියෙන පිළිවෙල කවර් කරගන්නද? එහෙම නැත්නම් මීට ඉස්සෙල්ලා වෙච්ච පාඩු කවර් කරගන්නද?
මීට ඉස්සෙල්ලා පාඩු නෑ. දැන්ට දුවන ඔපරේෂන් ගාන කවර් කරන්න තමයි අපි සජෙස්ට් කරන්නේ. මම දන්නා කැබිනට් පේපර් එකේ තිබුණ මට ඇවිල්ලා නෑ තාම අනුමැතිය.
මහජන උපයෝගිතා කොමිසම කියන්නේ අපිට පහුගිය කාලේ වෙච්ච පාඩු කවර් කරන් දෙන්න මගේ පනතෙන් අවසරයක් නෑ කියලා.
පිළිල්ල නෑ මේක. ඒක ඉතින් රටේ ප්‍රශ්නයක්. එහෙමනම් ආණ්ඩුව විසින් පිළිතුරක් දිය යුතුයි. විදුලි කප්පාදුව පැය කීයකට වැඩි කරන්න ඕනද? මේක කොහොමද පිරියව දරා ගන්න?
Now, meanwhile, Chairman of the Public Utilities Commission, Janakarat Naik, said the Ceylon Electricity Board has not informed them about a proposal on a tariff hike. Addressing a media briefing today, he said that it is impossible to revise electricity tariffs twice a year.
What we feel at the moment is that as we have increased the power tariff almost less than 4 months back, we need to make sure that the increased tariff, we need to analyze that whether it brings enough revenue for CB to sustain. We are quite sure with the downfall of the economy or maybe the contraction of economy almost by 8% this year. We are assuming maybe by next year also there will be a contraction of around 4%. And when there is a contraction in the economy, there cannot be huge demand for electricity because these are going in hand in hand because electricity consumption is based on the economic growth as well of a country. I urge people not to get panicked. There is no proposal yet sent by CB to PCSL for tariff hike. When it comes, we will probably analyze all these factors and we will go for consultation and we will definitely make sure that without disturbing any of the stakeholders, we make a genuine decision about the tariff. Do not worry about this automatic tariff hike that they have proposed of the first day of January and first day of July. It will never happen. Everything will happen according to the things laid out by the respective act by PCSL.
The Minister of Power and Energy, Kanchana Vijayasekara, says the Ceylon Electricity Board has been directed to issue paperless bills and receipts to all customers with effect from January 2023. Instructions were given during a discussion with the CB's management. The Minister has discussed the steps taken to reduce expenses and further measures that could be taken to reduce CB costs. The Power Minister also gave directives to the CB officials to hold the ongoing construction work of the CB's new headquarters. He further stated that a decision was taken to regulate the fixing of street lamps and operating of street lamps. And the Director General of Health Services, Dr. Asela Gunawardana, said today that the mandatory requirement to produce a COVID-19 vaccination certificate upon entry into the country has been lifted with effect from today. Further, all overseas arrivals are no longer required to produce a negative PCR on rapid antigen test done either prior to boarding or on arrival. Dr. Gunawardana went on to state that in the event a foreign national tests positive for COVID-19 during their stay in the country, they will be required to self-isolate for a period of 7 days at their residence, a private hospital or a hotel, and bear all related costs. Sri Lanka mandated the carrying of a negative COVID-19 test and proof of vaccination when it opened its borders to foreign arrivals amidst the COVID crisis in 2021. Welcome back. And the Defence Secretary General Kamal Gunaratne says the government has taken necessary steps to preview the prevailing national defence policy, adding that the revised defence policy would strengthen the national security mechanism through an inclusive, futuristic and comprehensive manner, addressing wider security concerns affecting Sri Lanka. He made these comments while addressing a guest lecture at the Defence Services Command and Staff College.
A guest lecture to the student officers of course number 16 at the Defence Services Command and Staff College was held under the patronage of Defence Secretary General Kamal Gunaratne.
Wisdom and knowledge intertwined with professionalism for an officer is considered foremost, as those will decide the ultimate and end state in battle. Therefore, we are in desperate need of highly qualified, skilled and professional officers to guide our forces towards a challenging and demanding future. At a time of global interdependence, the contemporary security threats and challenges such as climate change, global terrorism, proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, economic crisis, famine, infectious diseases, cyber attacks, etc. are global in their scope, transitional in their effects, and however, can never be solved by military means only. It needs a synchronized application of all possible spheres, stemming under all other elements of national power, with the military element in order to gain success, as the crises today have crossed the identified borders of conventional war fighting, in which the friend and foe are already known. At this backdrop, ladies and gentlemen, having realized the requirement of a robust security mechanism for the country, the government has taken necessary steps to review the existing national defense policy, which was drafted a couple of years back. The revised national defense policy and strategy would give new impetus to strengthen the national security mechanism through an inclusive, futuristic and comprehensive manner addressing wider security concerns affecting Sri Lanka. It will provide a clear and concise framework for the national security apparatus to take proactive actions to mitigate threats and ensure a safer, secure and thriving country.
Now, consignment of essential medicines and medical supplies worth 2 billion rupees donated by China reached the Colombo port yesterday. The Chinese embassy in Colombo, taking to Twitter, said that the shipment came in 24 containers with a total weight of over 255 metric tons. China has donated medicines worth 5 billion rupees to Sri Lanka since June. Now, the Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, says that unlike previous occasions, the IMF funding to the country this time is being given as budget support to pave the way for the country to receive support from the ADB and the World Bank. The Governor also stated that pressure from the balance of payment will be less and that we will be able to build on the country's reserves.
Where are we in terms of getting IMF board approval? Where are we in terms of some of the prior actions?
When we started negotiating IMF program, our debt was unsustainable in all the metrics. That once you do what they call debt sustainability analysis, we had done our own internally, and IMF also did that on their own. Now the next important part is to get our creditors agree to what they call essentially bilateral credits, the financing assurances. That is where we are. We have made good progress. Especially Paris Club, India have been supporting and we have shared all the information. We had 2 meetings for sharing information with all the creditors at the same time on a transparent and comparable basis. And China, obviously, as President mentioned, they have been a little late to come into the process because a lot of things are happening in China. Now we are engaging with them. Earlier, our target was to get the financing assurances somewhere in November so that we had the target date for board meeting in December. But that will not happen this time because there's a little delay with China. And now we are looking at January board meeting if we get the financing assurance from China during this month. That is why I think we are confident that we can manage the situation. And obviously we engage continuously in good faith with our commercial creditors. That is a requirement before we go to the board. And once we get the IMF program on board, then obviously the restructuring complete process will happen before the first review of the fund. That is a standard process that we are going on. This I think also you can see the situation is in terms of stability. We are getting gradually coming back to normalcy.
Provided that we do get IMF board approval by January, what other potential funding lines can open up?
The IMF funding this time will come as budget support, not only for the balance of payment for the central bank. Once we get that approved, then ADB and World Bank also are waiting in terms of what they call policy-based lending. Those are also linked to certain structural reforms. In addition, so IMF structural reforms are focusing in very few areas, mainly social safety net and reducing corruption and vulnerabilities, some financial sector reforms. But in addition, there are a lot of other reforms. World Bank and ADB is supporting mainly financial sector long-term reforms. World Bank has power sector, ADB is supporting. So there are policy-based, structural reform-based funding also from both institutions, and plus the financing gap is also filled through the debt relief that we are expecting from our creditors, both the commercial and bilateral. So basically, if we get the debt relief for long period, which means our pressure on the balance of payment is less, and we should be able to build up our resource through sources of once we get the program stable. That is why both balance of payment support on one side and the budget support on the other side to finance the budget deficit. And also, this all are based on structural issue is the fiscal deficit, which is driving the current account deficit, tin deficit.
The chief of the delegation of German Industry and Commerce in Sri Lanka, Maria van Antonio von Schonberg, says businesses that do not adopt sustainable practices will not have a future in the European market, and therefore small and medium-scale enterprises and corporates in Sri Lanka must embark on the diligence and good governance. Addressing an event in Colombo, she said accountants in businesses need to be strategic partners in the transition process to a more sustainable future using their skill sets.
Tax Awards 2022, organised by the Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka, was held in Colombo last evening.
A healthy environment has unique intrinsic value and contributes to a country's livability and sustainability by not only providing clean water and air and habitats for species, but also by being the basis for many regional industries such as agriculture and tourism. And did you know that environmentally friendly companies are far more popular? Research from the National Marketing Institute in the US has shown that if a customer knows your organization is doing right by the environment, they are 58% more likely to buy their products. More and more governments around the world are enacting laws that mandate some form of human rights due diligence. One such example is the German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, which will come into force this upcoming January 2023. The European Union is already preparing their own due diligence act that will probably come into force in 2024. And while the German Supply Chain Act focuses on compliance with human rights and only indirectly covers environmental protection, the EU Due Diligence Act explicitly includes negative impacts on the environment, for example, through environmental pollution or loss of biodiversity in its scope of protection. And the European Supply Chain Act, in contrast to the German Act, requires monitoring of the entire value chain without any further ado. This means that companies will be increasingly called to account for what they are doing regarding ESG, and not only by lawmakers, but also by investors and clients on a B2B and B2C level. Accountants can and should be a strategic partner in this transition to a more sustainable future. You already have the right skill set to measure ESG impact and disclose these results. You have the duty to ensure that the companies you work for recognize the relevance of ESG in business, and that the success of their operations should not come at the expense of the environment or the human rights of other people. The future of businesses will either be sustainable or there will not be businesses. They will not have a future. This makes it necessary for SMEs and corporates alike in Sri Lanka to embark and drive good governance and business due diligence. We need businesses and organizations with long-term vision and values, cooperation, determination, and respect.
Now, oil weakened today with Brent crude falling close to its lowest this year, pressured by concern about recession and easing fears that a Western cap on Russian oil prices would significantly curb supply. Warnings from big US banks about a likely recession next year weighed and supported the US dollar. A stronger dollar makes oil more expensive for holders or other currencies and tends to dampen appetite for risk assets. Brent crude fell by $1.01 to $78.30 a barrel. It touched $77.74 earlier, the lowest since the 3rd of January. US crude was down $1.24 to $73 and touched $72.25, the lowest since late December. Brent settled below $80 yesterday for only the second time in 2022 and has unwound the year's gains, which had lifted prices close to the all-time high of $147 in March after Russia invaded Ukraine. Fears were easing that the price cap on Russian crude oil could cause a supply shock. And that's all the news we have for this evening. Join us again tomorrow for the very latest news at the very same time. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.